Hello, and welcome to Sobercast, where we provide AA speaker meetings and workshops in podcast format. We're an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us be self-supporting by visiting Sobercast.com, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 into our virtual basket. We hope you enjoy the podcast. Have a great day.
Hi, I'm Stacy, alcoholic.
Hi, Stacy.
So my sobriety date is November 7th, 2012. I have a sponsor, a home group, a service physician, and it's nothing short of a miracle, really, that I'm standing here before you tonight. I'm very grateful to be asked to be here. Wow. There's a lot of you out there. The podium thing is kind of new to me. I got sober in South Dakota, and we don't do podiums in South Dakota. We don't do a lot of things in South Dakota but drink, to be honest, which is why I'm here tonight. But so yeah, I guess that's how the story begins. I was 12 when I had my first drink, and it wasn't peer pressure. I wasn't at a party in a cornfield. I was at home after school one day, and decided to raid my parents' liquor cabinet just of my own volition. I cracked open a can of soda, poured half of it down the drain, and filled the other up half with my dad's bottle of vodka. And I was off to the races, so we say. And I did that, several days thereafter. I never got caught. Or, I guess if my parents knew that I was doing it, they never said anything to me. And I didn't have a lot of consequences for my drinking until I turned 15 and got my first minor consumption. And when I got my first minor consumption, I remember my mom said to me, she said, "You've ruined our family reputation." I was like, really? We had a family reputation? But, I went to court-ordered treatment and lied my way through it, said that this is the first drink I had ever taken, got caught, poor me. Never did any drugs, wasn't engaging in any other harmful behaviors, which of course I was doing all of those things. But I didn't want to get better. I liked the life that I was living. I was cutting school on a regular basis. But my grades were fine. So like I said, I didn't really have any consequences for my drinking. I wasn't going to juvenile hall. I was just getting a slap on the wrist for this first minor when I was 15. My parents were upset. I was grounded for maybe a couple of weeks, but I had my own job. I was working, making my own money. It didn't really seem like a problem. So what did I do? I kept drinking, and I kept drinking the way that I was drinking. And, looking back then, did I know I had a problem? Probably, because I wasn't really drinking how my friends drank. If I went and bought a 6-pack of beer and I threw up, I kept thinking like, oh, well, I'm just going to keep drinking 6-packs until I stop throwing up. I'm going to get better at this. I didn't think that maybe I should only drink 5 beers. I had goals. And I don't think other people thought that way. I think that I just thought that way. Maybe you guys thought that way, but I didn't know you yet. And, it continued on like that until I got to college. And, I went to college and, drinking just got bigger and better. I got introduced to kegs and I thought that was awesome. And, I could drink the way that I wanted to drink there because my parents were no longer involved. And, again, my grades were good enough, so it didn't really matter if I went to class or not. I still didn't really have a lot of consequences for my actions. I could find people who drank the way that I wanted to drink in college, and if it wasn't at keg parties, then I could find townies who drank the way that I wanted to drink, and that was awesome. I could pretty much do what I wanted to do, and it felt like freedom, and I didn't know at the time that it wasn't really freedom. So I graduated college and, went out into the real world, I guess we say. And, that was a little bit scary because, I was on my own, really for the first time. And, lost a lot of my friends. People were, moving away. They were getting married. They were having kids and those kinds of things. And that stuff never really happened for me. And I wasn't really sure why. I didn't know that maybe my drinking was getting in the way of what normal life should look like. I just thought that, I've heard it said in meetings before that, I wasn't, that I'm alone because I drink. I don't drink because I'm alone, and I always had that backwards in my head. And that was really hard for me to understand. And so anyway, so I kept drinking, and kept kind of having to find worse and worse people to hang out with in order to drink the way that I wanted to drink. And I guess that's probably not so unusual. The quantities I was drinking became larger and larger. And that was scary. And now I started to have some consequences for my drinking. I started getting DUIs. I started getting in trouble at work. I started losing jobs because of work, or I started losing jobs because of my drinking. I was the girl who was in the bathroom the next morning at work throwing up because I drank too much the night before, and I didn't see other people engaging in this kind of behavior. We would go out at night and have company parties and things like that, and everybody else made it home, and I was the girl who couldn't make it home. And that didn't really make sense to me because I thought I was doing the same things that everybody else was doing, but I wasn't. Why was I the one getting sick? Why was I the one who had to close down the bar every single night and then stop at the liquor store on the way home and drink some more? I didn't understand this obsession that I had with never having enough, and how it was impacting my life. So like I said, I ended up getting arrested twice. I got 2 DUIs in the course of a month. So that was a pretty big blow. I hadn't even appeared in court on the first one before I got the second one. Yeah, so that wasn't great. I was doing a lot of contract work at the time and feeling kind of sorry for myself that I couldn't hold down a steady job. This is about the time when, the economy was going bad, everybody's getting laid off, and I'm drinking to feel better about it. I'm getting the DUIs, and I'm thinking I don't know what to do with myself. And the only solutions I have is drinking and alcohol, and it's getting worse and worse and worse instead of better. And I've got nothing. I've got no tools except drinking. People are, abandoning ship because they see what's happening to me. I've got friends and family who are not returning my calls and saying that that they wish they could help me, and they don't like seeing what I'm doing to myself, and I don't like it either. But I got no options, and so things get worse. I spent 18 months on unemployment. And I'm drinking my way through my 401k and my savings account. And then I get hit with a bombshell. I go out on election night in 2010. And that night, I'm walking home through the streets of Denver. And I get attacked and raped in the streets on my way home. And I thought my drinking was bad before. Again, like I said, I got no tools other than drinking. So this is when I really kind of fall off the cliff, so to speak. I'm scared to leave my house, except to go to the liquor store and come back home again and keep drinking. And I can't hold down a job. When I do go out to go to the bars, I get thrown out, or I get in fist fights because I think that every guy that I see is the person who attacked me, even though I know in my head that's not true. So I'm getting arrested for assault. I've got a warrant out for my arrest for assault. And so I'm completely unemployable. But I'm a victim of my own making. Because I can't stop drinking. I know of no other solution. So this goes on for about 2 years. I've been in the emergency room 4 times in the last year for broken bones. I fall off a bar stool and I get staples in the back of my head. Most of this I don't remember, so don't feel too sorry for me because it's pretty much a big black hole. Finally, I moved back home with my folks in South Dakota because I've got no other options. I've got no money. I've got nothing, and it just so happens that I'm watching election results come in 2012, and it's 7:00 the next morning, and I get arrested for my third DUI, and I'm thinking it's 7:00 in the morning. How can I get a DUI? Well, if you drink like I drink, you're still drunk at 7:00 in the morning. So I go to jail, and I'm getting charged with a felony. And I spend 24 hours in solitary confinement because they can't put me in with the general population. I'm so drunk. And I'm sitting there in solitary in Sturgis, South Dakota, which, if you're going to go to jail, is actually a pretty decent jail. And I'm sitting there, and I'm talking to God for the first time in many, many years because I think that he's completely abandoned me, because I think, like, what God is going to let me be raped in the middle of the street in Denver, right? But I'm talking to him, and I'm thinking, like, this is the bottom. Like, I got nothing. Like, I got nowhere to go. I've been just arrested, and I'm facing a year in prison. Like, what do you want from me? Like, where do you want me to go from here? And I'm just terrified. I mean, I've never been so scared in my whole life. And this is the breaking point for me. I get released that next morning, 24 hours later, the next morning, and my mom comes to pick me up, and they won't let me go. They won't let me go without an ankle bracelet on that's monitoring my alcohol consumption, and they also, as a part of a condition of my release, I have to go to AA meetings until I can, because I saw the judge when they let me go. And anyway, so all of this is part of the conditions of my release, and I'm not completely sold on it at the time, but I figure I've got nothing else. And so I start coming to meetings, and at my very first meeting, I meet a woman who comes up to me afterwards, and she says, "Do you want me to be your sponsor?" I don't know what the hell a sponsor is, but, like I said, I'm desperate. So I say yes, and I give her my phone number, and she starts taking me through the book. And I needed every single day of those 7 months to hear what you people had to say to me and to tell me your stories so that I could understand that I'm an alcoholic and that there was a solution for me. Because sitting in the jail cell that morning, I wasn't so sure that there was hope for me. I thought that my only out was probably suicide, because that's how scared I was and that's how out of options I was. I had circled the drain for so many years. And although, I don't know, if I had to do it all over again, would I have done it would I have chosen the hard way? I don't know. But I'm so glad that this is my story, to be honest, and I'm so grateful that I'm here, because I really do think that it's a miracle. There are so many different ways this story could have gone, and ending with 3 years sobriety next month is really not the outcome I thought this story was going to have. And I'm immensely grateful for that. And, I just think God keeps putting the right people in my path, from the officer who arrested me to the man who raped me. They all got me here, to the woman who became my first sponsor, to the woman who's my sponsor today, to the women that I sponsor. I think that all of these women are in my life for a reason. And, and all of you who told me your stories for those first 7 months, so that I could get clear-headed enough to know that I absolutely belong here. And, I wasn't sure that there was really a place for me in this world, and thank God that there is. Thanks so much for letting me share my story tonight. I really appreciate it, and I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mckenzie. I'm an alcoholic. Let's see, my sobriety date is March 16th, 2005. My home group is MOB on Tuesday nights. have a sponsor who is in this room probably judging me as we speak very heavily. Have some guys I work with a little bit. They don't call too much. I hear from them every once in a while. If there's anybody new, you're looking for a sponsor, I'm always looking to work with people for sure. Help people out. Where to start? Geez. I don't really plan these things out. I just kind of come up and just shoot from the hip and tell my story. So I'll probably jump around all over the place with this. I was asked to speak here about a month or two ago, something like that, and I absolutely said yes. I love these opportunities to give, do some service and things like that. And then about a month ago, I learned that Neil Young is performing tonight down at the WAMU Theater. And Lucas Nelson, who is Willie Nelson's son, is in Neil's backing band, and I'm like, oh man, I got to go to that show. Like, music is a huge part of my life, so I'm like, yeah, I got to back out of that. I got to figure out a way to get out of that meeting tonight. But that thought stayed in my head for like a couple minutes, and I'm just like, yeah, I can't do that. And that's just kind of how things are today. Like, I still have wild, crazy, terrible thoughts go through my head, like probably multiple times per day. But most times they just disappear pretty quick. I don't sit on it for a long time. And with that, like I knew with something like that, like while music is extremely important to me, it's not the most important thing in my life. And AA is the most important thing in my life because like without this program, without doing things like this, doing service, I'm pretty sure I'll go back out and drink, and then I'll probably die, which almost happened without this program. So to kind of start off, I guess, tell my story, I grew up in Ohio. I won't talk about my young childhood too much because I feel like it's not overly important to the story, but as a kid, I saw a lot of things I probably shouldn't have seen, arrests, drugs, alcohol, a lot of different things like that. It's just my story. It's just kind of those are the cards I was dealt, and dealt with a lot of things as a kid. And, reflecting back, I can kind of remember sometime around like the third grade, I think it was, is where I can remember, looking back on it, where life started to get stressful for the first time. So I was probably, third grade, 8-ish, something like that, which, I don't think life should really be stressful for an 8-year-old. But it was, and that's where I first can remember like feeling less than others. And I would struggle in school, and school was difficult, and frustration with my family and different things like that. And like things just were all things just started irritating me easily at like a very, very young age and things like that. And school and life just started to be a struggle back then. And I didn't realize that, for many, many years until like I said, I think a couple years ago I kind of like looked back and kind of saw that. And what I personally believe is I feel like we're born with alcoholism. And I feel like it's something that I was born with, and I feel like that's when, like, the demons, as I call them, first started to really act up somewhere around that age of 8 of, like, you're less than, and, these different things, and to try to really get inside my head to make things rough for me so I'll eventually, go out and drink and things like that. I could be wrong, but that's just, I don't know. Looking at it, that's kind of how I feel about things. Rolled through grade school, high school, all those different kind of things. The first time I drank, it was before I'd moved to Cincinnati. I lived in a small town up in East Ohio. And, I went out. I was a sophomore in high school, and I went out with, I was invited to a party with a bunch of seniors and maybe a couple of juniors or something like that. And just got lit up with these kids, got drunk for the first time, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. It was just like lighting the fuse, and that's one of like a couple of times I can think of in my life where like this big shining moment of like I fit in, like I get it, like I'm one of these people, this and that, and they're all encouraging me like you're the only cool one out of that sophomore class and blah blah blah, and I'm like yeah, like, and they quickly took my keys, I quickly threw up, I quickly passed out, all that kind of stuff, but it was amazing. The next morning, like I had a hangover and I was so happy, I was just like, I want to go do that again. And I was really jazzed for it, and but I didn't for a while. Like the crowd that I ran with at that age, like they just weren't really into that. A couple months later, I moved to Cincinnati with my mom, and I was a late bloomer for that kind of a thing. And so I started puberty pretty late, and when I moved to Cincinnati, it was around the same time, something like that. And I just became completely wild as soon as I moved there. Basically, my mom was a single mom, worked multiple jobs, things like that. And pretty much from the time that I touched ground in Cincinnati, I was uncontrollable. I very quickly got in with crowds at school that drank, and they drank heavy. Had to repeat my sophomore year because I was a terrible student and things like that. So I was with sophomores at this new school. And I started drinking a lot and going out and partying. I absolutely loved it. I quickly became known as that guy. I was part of that crowd, like the kids that drank in school. And I was an athlete as well, which is weird. So I was kind of happy. I fit in with that crowd as well because I was a wrestler. So regardless, I just had all these things of you fit in, and it felt good and this and that. And I wasn't. The bullying was less than when I was younger and things like that. So this big feeling of acceptance is really what it was. And the drinking, constant fights with my mother. I put that poor lady through a lot. I really did. And I've made amends time and time over. And there's basically nothing I can ever do enough to make full amends for everything that I did. But it got pretty rough. There was one in particular. I learned a lot of info about a lot of terrible things that happened when I was a kid, and then a couple other incidents just happened to fall at the same time. And I had no tools on how to deal with life as a teenager. The family that I grew up in, while they were a loving family, I grew up with a family that you don't talk about your issues. It doesn't happen. You either just ignore them or you deal with it on yourself, on your own. And those were my tools of how to deal with life. And so everything from a little kid, everything just snowballed and just built up and built up and built up. And finally, when I was, I guess 18, something like that, everything just, after all these different incidents and things happened, everything just built up to a complete explosion. And I made a decision one night that I was going to take my life. And so I told my mom good night, typical thing. Waited about an hour till I knew she was asleep and this and that, and went in the bathroom and tried to slice up my wrist. Thankfully, I wasn't a very smart kid, and hadn't done a lot of research on that process, and there was no Google back then, this and that. And obviously I didn't do a very good job. And but when I started bleeding pretty heavy, I freaked out basically, and wow, this is real, and this and that. And so I called a friend to take me to the emergency room, and then they had to call my mom, who, imagine waking up in the middle of the night getting this phone call, your son has done this, he's at the hospital, and she's like, no, he's right next door, he just, so she has to go to the hospital, that whole thing. So I got to spend a week in a psych ward after that with some people that had a whole lot more problems than I did, for sure, and that was a very, very eye-opening experience. And you would think that to normal people, you guys probably get it. But to normal people, they'd probably well, that should have been enough for you to get well, right? Well, not so much. As soon as I got out, I think I was high within an hour. As soon as I got home, I'm gone, high instantly. And I think I did acid for the first time a week after that. And when I found that drug, I was really off and running in high school. And that's when I did my hardest drug partying when I was in high school, actually. And it's funny, I just realized several years ago that, so I used to deal acid in high school a lot. I was that guy as well. And I know drugs are part of my story, but I'm sorry for that, for this AA meeting and all. But it wasn't until recently that I just realized that that's a real heavy felony, selling acid in high schools. And, I look back on it man, I could have gotten a lot of trouble for that. So, but I never did. I dodged a few bullets when I was in high school, for sure. Kids would come and just come up to the doorway and, kind of give the notion. I'd go meet in the back. Anyway, I dealt drugs in high school. That's what I did. I've always been a person that has a pretty decent amount of willpower. At least so I thought. Kind of looking back on it, I didn't have quite as much as I thought. But if I said I was going to stop something, I would stop it. But the problem is I would go and do something else. So when I graduated high school, I decided to, I gave up hard drugs, and then that's when my drinking really took off full blown. I got a job not too long out of high school where I was making really good money for the age I was and where I lived, So I had money to fund my partying habit, and I'd moved out of the house finally and things like that. And I was just off and running. And I guess there was a big wave that came rolling through Cincinnati of ecstasy pretty hard, and I got really wrapped up into that and the rave scene and things like that for about a year. And but again, like I started noticing that was taking a really, really hard toll on me as well. So finally, after a point, I decided, I have to put the ecstasy down. Like that's screwing with me just way too much. And just went to drinking hardcore, really, really heavy. And there was definitely good times for sure. Like I did a lot of things. Like we went and partied in like New York City for New Year's Eve, and Las Vegas, and New Orleans for Mardi Gras, and like Panama City Beach for spring break. And I had a lot of fun kind of things like that. I think looking back on it, they weren't as fun as I thought they were, and life wasn't as great as I thought it was, but it seemed like fun at the time. I was secretly miserable, but it was something I would never tell people because, again, like the background I have is like you don't tell people when you're miserable and different things like that. And I became the kind of drinker who was very, very secretive. So, like, if a bunch of friends and we went out to a bar and, hit it all night and then everybody heads home, I'd be like, okay, yeah, good night. Well, I would stay up drinking alone until, 3, 4, 5, sometimes 8, 9 o'clock the next morning until I got to the point that I was looking for. And I thought that was amazing. Like, a great life for me was just, like, sitting around watching episodes of Married with Children or something like that, and like just drinking myself to a complete stupidity like that. But then my friends couldn't understand the next day, it's like 6 p.m. and I'm still in bed and I can't get out and I'm a mess. And they're like, what's up? And I'm like, they're like, you drank the same amount as us. I'm like, I'm just weak, I guess, whatever. But they didn't know that I had actually been hitting it harder and harder because I didn't want to be labeled as an alcoholic because that would be embarrassing. Is kind of the way my head was. And I grew up around a lot of alcoholics, and I wasn't that bad. It was always my justification for things like that. Let's see. I feel like I was always a couple of different things to touch on, I guess. I wasn't a mean drunk. I was a blackout drinker for sure. My goal was to get blackout drunk because when that happened, all my problems went away. And I loved it. That was always the goal. That was something, again, that I never told other people, but like that was it. That's where I wanted to get to. And unfortunately, if you're a blackout drinker, you often hear stories later of what you did while you were blackout drunk. For me, driving was a huge one. Because like where I grew up, especially back then, there was no Uber, no Lyft. There wasn't even cab services where I lived. So like you just drove everywhere because like nothing was close. And we weren't going to walk. So I drove a lot while blackout drunk and things like that. Did a lot of really, really, really dumb things. I can remember coming to, like that TV show Quantum Leap or something like that. I just came to one time, and here's a scenario where I'm driving through somebody's front yard. I'm just like, what the... And it was like a big country front yard, but like... I'm glad you guys can laugh at that, right? But I could have killed somebody, And there were so many mornings that I woke up and wondered that, like first off, after I'd figured out that I had drove, I'm like, I wonder if I killed somebody, and that terrible feeling in my gut of like, man, that could be real. Like the police could be looking for me right now. Where is my vehicle? So many times I woke up, I had no idea where my car was. I have to get roommates to drive me all over the city to try to find my car. Sometimes we'd find it, sometimes it would take a long time. That was a very normal, every weekend occurrence kind of thing. And my tolerance had gotten really good at that point. Like I was a really heavy drinker at that point. Things worked for a while. I was always a disciplined person, so no matter how bad of a hangover I had, like I would just get up and just go to work, sometimes even still drunk, but I'm like, you have to work, it's almost like I signed a contract. Well, I did sign a contract, but I was really good at holding my nose to that type of thing, and I would just grind through it. But as things started moving into my mid-20s and things like that, getting to work started getting harder, and there started having to miss some days here and there, and my health was starting to get worse, like a lot of nosebleeds and terrible splitting headaches, and I put on a lot of weight, like 40 or 50 pounds, and like, they were telling me that like my cholesterol when I was like 22 or 23 was of somebody in their late 50s, and like I had to change my lifestyle and things like that. And so, like I said earlier, I wasn't necessarily a mean drunk or things like that, but like when I was in relationships and things like that, everything just always had to be around me. Like I was never mean with any girls or anything like that, but it was just like I kind of didn't care about them, and everything had to meet all of my needs and this and that. And so I could be a real, I want to cuss in this meeting so bad, man, but that's just who I am. But so I was just a really terrible person. I would do whatever I had to do to get my ways. And part of that was I was so screwed up, and I had the notion in my head that, like I had a bad life when I was young. I felt like I deserved to take that out on other people. And I would purposely lie to people and lie to women and lie to employers and family members and this and that, and like to manipulate them to get what I wanted out of things, and almost as a game to see how much I could get away with. The problem with that when you're a blackout drinker is you tend to forget who you told what. And I got caught in all kinds of lies, and I just wasn't good at a lot of different things like that. And sometimes as a blackout drinker, I would get violent. Like I remember several years ago, I was like talking to a friend, like 5 years ago, something like that, and John Mellencamp had come out with an album. I was like, oh man, I've always wanted to see that guy. And he's like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, well, we saw him. Like we were at a John Mellencamp show, and he told me that he was like John with some guy, like they were about to fight, and I just walked up and sucker punched the guy right in the mouth, and this big fight started. And then a whole bunch of people were getting into it. I have no recollection of that whatsoever. I've got stories for days like that, honestly. Busted in the face with like a steel pipe because I slashed people's tires, and like we all have drunk logs, everybody in here, but like things were getting out of control. But I didn't think they were out of control was the problem. I just thought that like I had really, really bad luck was the deal. And yeah, my drinking just increased, and I would always try to drown out all my problems. That was my biggest thing, because I had, again, still no tools how to deal with anything. So it started getting to the point, my health was getting really, really bad, and it started getting to the point where getting to work at all was just like not happening, and my employer were close to firing me, and we're starting to have meetings like, you've really got to get your stuff together. And I just started running out of options, man. Like, I stopped drinking, like, one time for, like, 30 days, I think, just to see if I could do it, but I just got bored with it. Like, I made it, like, 25 or 26, and I was just like, that's a really boring life. I don't want to do that. Things started to get really miserable again. Way worse, just like they were the first time. And I don't know if I really had a bottom point at that. Something just kind of clicked one time where I was like, even though I had like a nice place to live and I had money and, I could usually date okay, I was just a complete miserable human being. I would drive down the street. I can remember like, a very common thing for me to do was just driving down and like spot out a telephone pole like, 50 yards away, 75 yards, and be like, that's the one. Let's go. And laying on the gas and going for it and unbuckling my seatbelt and then backing off like I wouldn't do it, And this started to happen again, like as my drinking was getting worse. And so I had enough sense in my head that like that's a problem. And I remember I called a friend one time and I was just like kind of spilling my guts about the whole thing. And he goes, yeah, you should probably go see a therapist. Like that doesn't sound too good. So I took his advice and I went and saw a therapist. And after the first, couple of sessions, 2 or 3, she started kind of grilling me on how much I, drank and consumed and different things like that. And I lied and told her like half, and that still qualified me. She's like, yeah, I think you need to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was incredibly offended by that. I was so mad at that lady for that. Because I grew up around what I consider to be alcoholics, and I hadn't hit those points. Like, out of all those blacked out times and everything, I never got a DUI. I talked myself out of 4 DUIs growing up. To this day, I still have no idea how I did it. I kind of do sales for a living, and a couple years ago that kind of clicked with me. I'm like, I was able to talk my way out of DUIs back then. I guess I'm pretty good at sales. That's where everything kind of came together with that. So anyway, I took the person's advice and I went to an AA meeting very reluctantly. And the very first meeting, this guy came up to me and he's like, gave me his name. He gave me this blue book and it had his phone number in it and all this stuff. And I was just really confused. And he's just like, if you want help getting through this program, like, yeah, like. I felt like that program was for those people that needed it. Like, I did not feel like I belonged, and that was not the case in this and that. It made sense, and like the things I was hearing, I was like, yeah, this could work for those that need it, cool. But I wasn't court ordered, and I wasn't I didn't have to fill out slips and take them to the therapist. Like, I could go as much as I want, and for some reason I kept going, and to this day I have no idea why. I guess I just needed it, and that guy eventually became my first sponsor. And I was still very reluctant, for the first 6 to 9 months or something like that, I would go to one meeting one day a week, and it was like a speaker meeting like this, and I'd sit in the back, so as soon as it was over, I could bolt out the door and not have to talk to anybody. And I was working the program, is like what I would have told you, and, I could tell you how to do AA, and, that's how I felt about it, but really I wasn't doing anything at all. I was just a dry drunk. I eventually did go through the steps with that guy, and I was not easy to work with. Looking back, there was many times how I would tell him how he's working his program wrong, and the first two, first step I got through easy. The second one was a little harder. The third one I wasn't having it. It was that G word, and I was just like, no. As I grew up a Catholic, and I was very anti anything religious or spirituality. I didn't understand the difference between the two at the time, and I fought over that third step one. And so eventually just kind of got through it and muscled through it. But something happened when we did the fifth step for the first time. First off, I had a very, very long list for a fourth step, like pages and pages and pages. Like, I hated everybody. I wouldn't physically tell people that, but I had a lot of resentments built up through the world. And that, it took quite hours to go through that fifth step with him, right? And but something happened when we left. We went out into the parking lot. It was the Frisch's parking lot. If you're from Ohio, or Cincinnati area, you know what Frisch's is. And we walked outside, and I had what I feel like was my first spiritual experience. The clouds didn't part. There wasn't this giant ray of sunbeam or anything, but it felt like everything lifted off my shoulders. And for the second time, I had that feeling of I belong and I fit in, and everything just kind of made sense to me. And I got real serious with the program after that. And all the things that people would say in the meetings, everything started to kind of click, and it made sense to me and this and that. About a year went by, and I got really, really sloppy with my program. Another couple of incidents happened, and I completely snapped, and I'm like, aha, I knew that this program is BS, this whole believing in some kind of higher power thing, it's BS, blah, 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 blah. And I made the decision that instead of going to a meeting, I was going to go relapse. And, looking back, I used to always think in my head, if I ever relapse, there's going to be hookers and blow, and I'm going to go out with this big bang, right? And like most things in my life, how I think they're going to happen, that's not how it happened. I went and picked up a case of beer, and I drank 5 or 6 beers, and I was wasted, Bud Lights or something like that. But the problem was, though, that was the first time, I'd heard people in meetings say, when the alcohol stopped working, and I'd never experienced that, and I didn't understand what people were talking about when they said that. But that was the first time that it happened for me on that night. I drank heavily to try to go to a blackout stage for all my problems to go away, and they didn't go away. And I was petrified. I'm like, now what do I do? If I stay sober, I'm going to be miserable. Or if I drink, I'm going to be miserable. Through the rest of my life, that's where my head was, I thought. And so I thought, well, physically, it makes more sense to not drink then. I knew alcohol would be bad for me. If I'm going to be miserable anyhow, I might as well not damage my body with it. And I came back the next day, and I got very, very serious. The person here who said she had 30 days or something, I think you're the bravest person in this room. I remember when I had to come back that time, and I was sitting with my sponsor, and I was like, I don't want to announce that I got one day, man. He's like, you got to do it. I'm like, I don't want to do it. That was embarrassing. And but that moment was the beginning of the second part, of my real recovery, basically. And I went in full bore at that point. Like, the steps the first time took me 4 or 5 months to get through, something like that. The second time, I was plowing through them hard. Got them all done in a week, I think. And like, I got to it was coming up at the 5th step or something like that. My sponsor's like, well, I'm going to be in Florida. And I'm like, that's not going to work. Like, I really need to do this now. Because I knew the effects of the steps and this and that, if you take it serious. So, like, he had me, like, have his sponsor do it. And yeah, I ran through them. And basically, I've been serious about the program ever since. And it's unbelievable to me that it's been 10 years. Like, I can't. It's just that it doesn't make sense. Like, I'm finally calm for the first time in my life, Like, I go to sleep easy now. Like, I don't wrestle and twist and turn and this and that. Like, everything's just usually all right. And like I was saying earlier, like, when I have crazy thoughts and things like that, like, yeah, they happen, but like, they don't stay for very long. And if they do, sometimes I'll sit on them, but for the most part, I reach out for help because I don't want to sit in just that mess anymore. Or I'll go to a meeting, or I'll go do the steps and work with other people in the program, and I'll do my stuff. Because I don't want to live like that anymore. I want to help people, which is something I never, ever wanted to do. I didn't come to this program to help people. Like, I didn't care about anybody else. I was a very, very selfish and self-centered people. And now, like, what I do for a career, a living, like, I have a job where I get to basically help people, and I get to help people in this program, and that's become, like, the most important thing in my life. And I never... It's a real blessing, man. It is. And so that's why I came here instead of going to a Neil Young show, It's like, I got to show up. Like, they say that, like, I heard a guy say in a meeting a couple of years ago, he's like, if the program isn't an inconvenience to you, like, you're probably not doing enough work. And, like, coming here was kind of an inconvenience. I wanted to go to a concert, but I'm like, okay, I got to go do the work. I got to go show up, Like, there's other things. And sometimes I don't always want to go to a meeting, or I don't want to call my sponsor or do steps. But, like, if I want to stay sober, I have to do it. And kind of the thing I was talking about earlier, like, with having, like, discipline and stuff like that, like, I think most of the sponsors I've ever had, they've asked me from the beginning of, like, are you willing to do whatever it takes to stay sober? And I've always told them all yes. So whenever I even start having those thoughts of stuff like, well, I don't really want to do this, like, I go back and punch myself on it. Like, no, you said you're going to do whatever it takes to stay sober, so you have to do it. And I feel very blessed and lucky for that, because I don't think all people have that kind of discipline. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And but this is my place, man. This is where I'm alive. Like they're talking about the thing from 3rd grade. Like, I finally feel like, I feel like I'm carefree and and alive, like I was like before the 3rd grade, like I was talking about before things got difficult and stressful. Like, I finally feel like I'm back to like that place of like everything's just kind of okay, which is amazing. And I feel like if you stick around, you do the work and put it in, like that could very likely happen for you. Like, I know it's happened for a lot of people in this room. Like, some of my most favorite people in the world are in this room tonight. So I remember being at this meeting about 2 years ago. This meeting in particular, and like I was talking to a couple people after a meeting. And the old girlfriend and I had broken up. I was really, really upset about it, and like the guys, they could tell that I was bummed. Like, you okay? And I was just like, nah, like I'm not okay. I was like, but I told him, I was like, this is the only place I feel safe. And then I pretty much like started to lose it, and I just bolted out the door because I didn't want to cry in a meeting and everything. But but it's true, man. Like, these meetings are like the only place that I really feel like at home, and I feel safe with things, and I can talk with all kinds of people outside of the rooms and do different things. But this program absolutely saved my life, and I get to live a life now that I never ever dreamed. Like, I thought that this was the kind of life just happened to like the lucky people, and I was just an unlucky person. And there might be a little bit to that, but I did a lot of work to get here as well. And like it took all everybody showing up to meetings and getting to work with a lot of people to make that happen. So now I'm going to shake a few hands, give a couple hugs, go home and change my clothes and go to that Neil Young concert. So thanks.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Sobercast is ad-free, and we'd like your help in order to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help us be self-supporting by pledging $1 or $2 a month, visit Sobercast.com and look for the donate links. Thank you very much.